Item shops in a game. Places you need to visit but often can't really be bothered to go to. However, game developers often seem to take the time to make the experience as less painful as possible. Maybe they'll give the shop some absolutely cracking music. Maybe the item shop will come to you, open his coat and say a catchphrase. Maybe
the master works all, you can't go wrong.
Every adventurer will probably need an item shop from time to time. But what if you were the person who provided services to those brave and strong, selling things for way more than they were worth, all whilst yelling, "Capitalism, ho!" Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone else, let's have a look at Recettear, an item shop's tale. Recettear, an item shop's tale, is an action RPG/business sim created by Easy Game Station for Japan in 2007 and ported to the West in 2010. You take on the role of Recette Lemongrass, a young girl whose dad decided, "I'm gonna go off and be a brave hero," only to never return. One day she gets a knock on her front door from a fairy named Tear, probably Tear, stating that she is way behind on the rent. Tear suggests that instead of simply taking her house and all of her possessions, then instead they open an item shop and pay back weekly installments of the fee. Recette, given no other choice, decides to give it the old college try and make a sign for her new shop, that she names Recettear, a mashup of her and Tear's name. Recette is a slightly airheaded and optimistic girl, who always greets people with a smile, whilst Tear, on the other hand, is slightly more cold and calculated. She is essentially the bookkeeper for Recette, and keeps her on task. The duo make for some good banter as they get introduced to strange situations and people. Now, if you've seen my last two videos, shameless plug, oi oi, Recette kind of mixes the themes of Dark Cloud and Pikmin. The action RPG side of the game is once again just half of the overall experience, whilst the constant looming threat of paying your bills adds a sense of anxiety. Every week you have to pay back a certain amount of money, which increases in price pretty drastically very quickly every week. So you have to plan ahead on what days you're going to dungeon crawl and what days you're going to sell stuff. However, these games are never that simple, and there are a number of different gimmicks in the game to keep you on your toes. First we learn how to sell things above their average price because capitalism, ho! And we learn how to haggle. Some people will pay 30% or more for items, whilst others will simply storm out if you offer anything above 20% of the base price. There is a bit of a memory game aspect to this as you learn what each individual character is likely to pay. Then we get a new mechanic in which shop visitors will be selling their old bits and bobs to us, so we learn how to haggle for a better buying price. This adds a nice little mix up to the daily shop life. We also get introduced to people who pre-order items in which they'll pop back in a few days to pick up what they asked for. This introduces more schedule keeping for us. And on top of that, we also get daily news alerts informing us of fluctuating prices on certain items, be they cheaper or more expensive. If they're cheaper, well hey, pop over to the other shops and buy out their stock to sell when the price settles. Are they more expensive? Time to cash in and fill your shop with the more expensive items that you may have been hanging on to. The game does an awesome job in making you get invested into the shopkeeper life of Recette, choosing what items to put into your shop window, which will help entice people into coming into your shop, to messing around with wallpapers, flooring, carpets, etc. that give your shop a certain feeling, a sort of ranking system that determines what kind of people like the atmosphere of your shop. And ongoing side stories give the game an even deeper sense of life, be it meeting our character's rival of sorts, Alouette, whose family owns a much larger business, which leads her into infiltrating your shop for some reason, to meeting our first adventurer Louis, a beginner who barely has enough money to afford food, but keeps an optimistic attitude, all while searching for what kinds of grass he can actually digest. Speaking of adventurers, let's get into the RPG stuff. So, we meet Louis early on in the game, and accompany him on his trial to try and become a guild member. Once he succeeds, he gives us his guild card, meaning we can hire him whenever we want. When going on adventures, Recette and Tear gather up as much loot as they can whilst the adventurer clears waves of monsters, levels up and beats bosses. The dungeons themselves feel pretty diverse too, with constantly changing areas, backgrounds and enemies, as well as traps and events that can happen randomly. It really gives you a good feeling of progression when you go exploring. Bosses are surprisingly distinct and fun to fight, starting with a simple slime giant, who simply summons other slimes to the field that you will need to clean up, to a giant rat who you have to trick into eating poisonous mushrooms so that you can wail on his legs when he falls over. And there's a giant bat that shoots giant cyborg lasers at you as well, because why not? Now, combat itself is fairly simple, with one button to attack and a special attack button to use bigger moves, in which your adventurer will learn a small arsenal of. The fun of the combat comes in the different enemies you'll face. The game rewards you with more damage if you can flank an opponent, with slightly more damage on the side and a lot more damage if it's a back attack. Some enemies block frontal attacks with a shield, while some wait until your back is turned before they leap in close enough for you to land a strike, and of course there's enemies with ranged attacks as well. You'll also meet more adventurers as you progress, who all have their own quirks, starting with a thief called Charm, who tries to rob you, but you then befriend after defeating her because, why not, it's an anime game. Charm plays pretty differently to Louie. She has lower health and defense, but a higher attack and more mana, as well as her own special moves like this cool Shadow Clone ability. There's this girl, Nagi, a spear wielder who is hopelessly lost all the time, but will eventually make it back to town so that you can recruit her. As well as meeting adventurers out in a dungeon, you can also meet them in town as well. In town, there are a number of locations you can visit for small skits and bits of story, which help introduce you to new characters, but the encounters normally play out the same way. We meet the character a few times, do something nice to make them remember us, and they'll visit our store and eventually give us their guild card. However, a cool mechanic that I want to mention is how you equip your adventurers. You can either bring items with you on the day to force your adventurers to equip, or you can give them the item forever by selling it to them when they visit your shop, meaning you generally want to give them a good deal on the item when they visit. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but I like how it makes the characters feel like they are real, for lack of a better term. This cast of characters helps breathe life into the game, and it generally feels like you're slowly becoming an important member of the town. There's something really fulfilling about watching your shop that started with only 2 customers at a time slowly fill up with both regular faces and new customers. Especially so when you make the time to view each character's personal stories unfold in town and get a feel for their personality. So, if you're looking for a colourful, quirky game that somehow makes the daily life of juggling dungeon crawling and shop management incredibly enjoyable, then I couldn't recommend Recettear enough. It's a unique little gem with a cast of enjoyable characters that I caught myself goofy laughing at a bundle of times, and it's hard not to appreciate the charm and jovial atmosphere that it creates. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Sorry if my voice sounded a bit unbearable this week. I've come down with a cold, so I'm a bit nasally. If you enjoyed that video though, and you haven't subscribed, maybe consider it and give me a like, that really helps. I'm enjoying making these videos, so yeah, thanks again for watching, and see ya!